I'm sorry I couldn't help your friend, son. And I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I wish I could have let you stay, but, well, I suppose it wasn't just meant to be. It just wasn't meant to be.
Well, you may not be able to be a host for me, but we could still at least check and see if he might be suitable for either of the other two that we've collected. They do need homes after all, and if there's anyone that I would trust with the power and the safety of one of my own, it would be your father. He seems like a very good man, much the same as you, Keven, Nylea said, as her voice felt a bit reassuring, despite the fact that our hopes were dashed.
Others? My father asked, as I stopped for a moment to explain the situation of having to find new hosts for the symbiotes that I was taking away from the very bad people. Oh, so you got them in a fish tank. I don't see a fish tank anywhere, my father said, looking around the room, as I started to focus my thoughts a bit. And suddenly, the coating of liquid steel that I had produced to make the fish tank invisible suddenly began to gather, swirling off of the tank and revealing it. Whoa! That is a cool trick. Magical disappearing fish tank. Yeah, I've picked up a lot of tricks. So here's where I keep the ones that I take from the bad guys. Right now all I have is 2, but I'm hoping that we can increase that number by a lot. And I have to find them good hosts. And I was hoping, well, if you can't take Nylea, maybe one of these two will like you. After all, they have to decide that they like the cut of your jib, I suppose, I said, gesturing over to the fish tank. All you have to do is stand in front of it, and if one of them likes you, they'll make it obvious, I said, as my father began to walk over, standing in front of the fish tank and staring through the glass, as the 2 tiny little serpentine creatures swam their way to the front of the tank, beginning to look my father over, I suppose. After a moment, one of them seemed to tense up for a moment, shake its head before fluttering away, while the other stayed, seeming to focus deeper on him, fluttering back and forth for a moment, before starting to tap his head against the glass. Yes, I think that's a positive result. One of them favors your father. Okay, so one of them wants to bond with me? Wants me to be its host. So which power does this one have?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, that is the hatchling taken from our latest conquest. This will dramatically enhance your physical capabilities, far more so than with the average symbiote. Its abilities are focused primarily on the physical.
Oh, wait, hold on a second.
Is my dad going to become a mountain of muscle? Well, not necessarily, Nylea replied. The muscle mass he chooses to put on is, of course, his choice. He will most likely become more physically fit, but it's up to him to stack more on top of it.
Oh, okay. So how do I let the little guy in? Is it the same as when I shook your hand? Do I just put my hand in the tank?
Actually, yes, that should suffice. If it takes to you, then it will simply bond with you. All you need do is give it access.
Yeah, okay, my father said, as he rolled up one of his sleeves, placing his hand into the tank, as the small, fluttering, serpentine creature swam into his hand, pressing against it as his form began to dissipate beyond the skin. Still not used to this, he said, as the small creature disappeared inside, and my father removed his hand from the tank. Well, let's hope your mother is a fan of muscular.
Well, she ought to be. Quite frankly, having that symbiote bloodline will put you in excellent physical condition. You'll most likely burn off any excess fat that you might have. You'll be a paragon of physical health. The symbiote will see to that. It's within its instincts.
Wow. So I'm going to cut off this extra 20 pounds just by picking this little guy up, huh? Well, beats going to the gym, my father said with a smile. As after that, we simply kicked back, taking our seats on the sofa, drinking a few beers and laughing, telling some jokes back and forth. We talked about the possibility of my father superheroing, but he suggested that he was a bit too old to get into the superhero game, that he'd leave it to younger people, but that he was happy if this meant that in a bad situation, he might be able to lend his help if needed. We of course agreed to keep it secret and not tell our mother. She would probably freak out if she found out that her husband was hosting an alien organism. That was probably a bit too much for her to deal with. But eventually, me and my father hugged and said goodbye, as he had to get back home before my mother began to complain, saying his farewells as he left out the door, commenting that at least now I didn't have to hide it from him, and I could always tell him about my superhero work on his downtime. After that, the next week or so went without a hitch. Everything seemed to be moving along swimmingly. Echo continued to pay us visits, as she would start to hang out with us, and we would talk about things outside of being superheroes, laughing, telling jokes. Soon enough, she felt like part of the group, like she was supposed to be there. Ned was a bit deterred that my father managed to get a symbiote, and that none of them still liked him, but thought it was rather cool that my father was going to be a muscle monster. Work continued on the gadget for Echo, as Ned ordered in parts and pieces, with Vicky, aka Echo, footing the bill. He could afford to order nothing but the best, and so he was ordering high-grade material, custom fabricated boards, all sorts of interesting things that he said would all prove functional in the device, as well as help increase its durability. Me and Echo actually went out doing a bit of training together, as she worked to get a better grasp on using her abilities in combat. Being able to train with me was helpful, and she was a fast learner, picking it up fairly quickly. And surprisingly enough, she had some things to teach me too, just not combat-related things. After hearing that I didn't actually know how to play guitar, she decided to take the time to start teaching me. And with her as my instructor, I actually began to pick it up exceptionally quickly, at 10 times the normal rate, in fact. And by the end of the week, I was a fairly competent guitarist. Vicky actually joked about doing sort of a combo album, or branching off and doing some rock with me, saying that doing an album with the hero of New Star City would be great publicity, and some extra money in my bank account wouldn't hurt me. And my superheroing continued as usual, as I was getting plenty of publicity as the heavy metal knight, and stopping minor crimes, or even major ones, in the absence of superpower involvement, was fairly easy when you're basically bulletproof. There's not much they can throw at you when you're wearing a damn near indestructible suit of armor. So, crime rates in the city were down. Unfortunately, there was one more occurrence of the Black Dog Syndicate making an attack. Yet another bank heist, getting away with loads of money before I could show up, courtesy of Mr. Teleportation. Even with the ability to fly, trying to keep up with someone who can teleport themselves is basically impossible. They were in and out before I could get there, even monitoring police communications and the online people who track these kinds of things. It still didn't help me catch them. I showed up just too late, probably only a minute or so after they had already left, with the money from the bank in tow. Damn it, there has to be a way to keep up with these guys, or take that teleporting bastard off the board. Those little worm portals of his are a massive pain in my ass. and it has to be dealt with if I'm gonna have any chance of knocking these guys out. If I can take him off the board, then they're left maneuvering by foot. The only question was how to actually do it.